Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere very cold, very white, and very old. You're standing on a frozen coastline where the wind slaps your cheeks like it's trying to teach you a lesson. The horizon is endless. Snow crunches under your thick boots. Or, well, whatever you've tied to your feet. The sun, bright and unblinking, hangs just above the horizon, refusing to set. It's been there for days, weeks, maybe. You squint. Your head hurts. Your eyes ache. And you're only just realizing that snow blindness isn't just poetic. It's painfully real. You're not equipped for this. You have no sunglasses, no store-bought gear, not even chapstick. And unless you figure something out fast, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I read every one of them. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the Arctic. The air is thin. The wind is razor sharp. And there is no such thing as shade out here. The sun reflects off every surface. Ice, snow, more ice, and beams directly into your wide, blinking eyes. It's not just bright, it's blinding. You close your eyes, but it's too late. There's a pulsing white halo behind your lids. Snow blindness, they call it. Like someone's taken a flashlight to your retina and left it there for hours. You fumble through your gear. Oh wait, that's right. You don't have any. This is the pre-everything era. No goggles, no sunscreen, no microfiber hoodie with a drawstring. Just layers of animal hide and the creeping realization that the Inuit, somehow, had already figured all this out. Imagine this. It's thousands of years ago. You're one of the early Inuit, or maybe you're tagging along, dreamlike, as an observer. You trudge through the snow, your breath forming little clouds that freeze on your eyelashes. Your sled dogs huff and bark behind you, paws padding rhythmically across the crusted surface. You feel a headache coming on, not from exertion, but from light. Too much light. Even in the cold, it burns. Your elders warned you about this. Snow blindness isn't a joke. It's debilitating. It creeps in slowly, a soft sting in your eyes, a blurring of the world. Then one morning, you wake up and everything's white. Not poetic white, just nothingness. Sight turned off like a switch. The thing is, these people figured it out. And not recently, long before the words sunglasses or UV protection were scribbled into a product label. Long before polycarbonate lenses. The solution? A small strip of carved bone, wood, or ivory, fashioned carefully to fit across the face with two thin horizontal slits cut into it. That's it. That's the magic. You're skeptical. Of course you are. This looks like a Halloween mask someone forgot to finish. But you slip it on, pull the sinew-tight cords behind your head, and instantly the world becomes less painful. Those narrow slits reduce the sunlight entering your eyes while still allowing you to see just enough to move, hunt, and stay alive. You blink. The headache softens. You can see again. just enough, and you feel like the cleverest human alive. Historians still argue whether these slit goggles were first designed by accident, someone carving a mask to block wind and snow who realized it had an unexpected optical benefit, or if it was a result of cumulative observation, shared across generations through careful, wordless trial and error. What we do know is that the Inuit were wearing these goggles centuries before anyone in the Western world gave a second thought to sun protection in the cold. It's a funny thing. When most people think of dangerous sun, they imagine tropical beaches, sunburnt shoulders, maybe a margarita melting beside them. No one thinks of the Arctic. But here, the sun is a silent enemy. It never sets in summer. It reflects mercilessly off the snow, creating a bright white battlefield that wages war on your vision. And the goggles? They're genius. Not only do they block out harmful light, but the narrow slits enhance depth perception, something you're really going to need if you're tracking seals across drifting ice. It's not about fashion, it's about survival. Though, truth be told, they do have a certain minimalist charm. You hike further, your footsteps crunching through hard-packed snow. You watch the distant shimmer of ice dunes roll like hills beneath a low sun. It's strange how your mind quiets out here. No phone, no noise, just wind, light, and bone-carved invention. At camp, the elders pass around a few pairs of goggles. Some are made of driftwood, others from polished bone or antler. One is from smooth, creamy walrus ivory, delicately inlaid with a line of black soot for added contrast. You run your fingers over the slits. You think about how something this simple could be so perfect. The kind of design that even Silicon Valley couldn't improve. Of course, not every pair fits. Some slip sideways. Some fog with your breath. But you start to understand. This isn't just a tool. It's a learned craft. Passed down through families, carved by hand, tuned to the face of the wearer. They don't mass produce these. They grow them out of knowledge, out of climate, out of desperate necessity. And they work. Even today, if you squint through slits cut into a cardboard box, you'll notice how much more bearable bright light becomes. No battery, no filter, just geometry and common sense. Two things we all pretend to understand better than we do. So you sit beside a fire, small, smoky, made of whale oil and scrap wood, and you realize that the goggles aren't just keeping you alive. They're part of the landscape, as natural as the snow, as intuitive as blinking. You were wrong to laugh at them. You kind of want to make your own now. Not tonight, though. It's cold. The stars are out. The wind howls like it's looking for someone to haunt. But your eyes? They're safe behind two tiny slits. And for now, that's enough. You're waking up to the sound of ice groaning, not cracking, groaning, as if the landscape itself is stretching in its sleep. You blink through the slits of your snow goggles, your eyelashes crusted with frost. It's not quite morning, because morning doesn't mean much this far north. The sun's still hovering in the same place it was last night, and probably the night before that. Time is a slow circle here. You push aside the sealskin flap of your shelter, nothing more than a low dome of snow blocks, packed and smoothed into an igloo. The cold hits you like a wall, but you don't flinch. You're dressed head to toe in caribou hide and seal intestines. Glamorous? No. But incredibly warm? Absolutely. You kneel by your tools. A curved blade made from sharpened bone. A needle carved out of caribou leg. Some sinew, maybe from yesterday's catch. Nothing is wasted out here. Driftwood, rare as gold, is stacked neatly to one side. A bit crooked, scorched from earlier fires. There's a chunk of animal fat in your pouch. You'll use it for everything from cooking to waterproofing to softening your skin if it starts to crack from the dry cold. You're preparing to go out again. But today, you're not just hunting. You're making. You're crafting the very thing that's going to protect your vision. The slitted snow goggles. You run your fingers over a piece of flat bone. Maybe caribou, maybe seal. It's light, porous, just the right shape for your face. You pick up a flake of stone and begin to scrape. This is slow work and quiet work. There's no music, no podcast to keep you company, just the soft shh, shh, shh of bone against stone. You pause often to test the curve, to check the size. You don't measure with a ruler. You measure with your fingers, your instincts, and years of watching your parents and grandparents do the same. The first pass is just to flatten the material. Then you begin carving the eye slits, 2 narrow openings, just enough to peer through. You've seen people try wider ones, and you've seen them go blind after 2 days on the ice. There's a sweet spot, slits so narrow they almost seem useless, but they focus the light like a pinhole camera. It's not just superstition, it's practical optics. Historians still argue whether the Inuit fully understood the optical principles behind their snow goggles, or if they just noticed what worked and stuck with it. There's a kind of genius in that. Trial and error passed down over centuries, shaped by a place where the wrong guess can cost you your sight, or your life. You add a slight inward curve to the goggles now, so they rest more naturally on the bridge of your nose. You carve tiny notches at the sides for the sinew cords. You even add a small groove across the brow, maybe for decoration, maybe because it makes the goggles feel more yours. These goggles aren't factory perfect, but you know that someone 1,500 years from now might dig them up and still see the precision in your work. There's a timelessness here, a kind of design purity that doesn't need explaining. A cousin wanders over, curious. She brings a bit of seal meat, still steaming from the fire. You share a few bites in silence, and she points to your goggles with a nod. Good slits, she says, simply. That's the highest compliment you'll get today. Later, you mix a bit of soot into the inside surface of the goggles. Just a smear. It dulls the shine and helps with contrast. Yes, soot. Burned fat and bone. Primitive, maybe, but effective. Better than the anti-glare coating on your overpriced sunglasses back home. You remember those. Back when you thought Arctic was a flavor of Gatorade. There's a knock on the side of your igloo, more of a muffled thump, really. It's your neighbor, grinning, holding up his own pair of goggles. He's carved his from driftwood and added small decorative dots around the edge. Whalebone plugs, maybe. One man's eye protection is another man's fashion statement. Turns out, these goggles can be surprisingly expressive. Some are dyed with natural pigments. others carved with clan markings or tiny scenes. A hunter, a seal, a polar bear. It's wearable history. Museum-worthy, but also necessary to not walking into a glacier. You think about that for a second. How survival and creativity are often the same thing. People always imagine ancient life as grim and utilitarian, but that's only half the story. Out here, every object you make says something about you. Your skill, your people, your patience. And yet, for all their detail, these goggles are not shared lightly. You don't borrow someone's goggles. You make your own, fit to your own face, your own needs, like a fingerprint, or maybe a password. You wouldn't wear someone else's contact lenses, right? There's a sense of dignity in it, even ritual. Some families pass down their oldest pairs like heirlooms. Others bury them with the dead, so they won't go snowblind in the afterlife. Not a bad idea, considering the Arctic afterlife probably has a lot of reflective snow, too. You finish shaping the second slit. You thread sinew through the sides and tie the knots behind your head, just snug enough that they stay in place, but don't cut off circulation. That's a mistake you only make once. You slip them on. The world narrows into two narrow lines, but those lines are sharp, focused. You can see the dog team, huddled in the distance, the glint of sun off a patch of distant ice, the shimmer of something alive moving near a breathing hole. You smile, just a little, because now you're not just part of this land, you're prepared for it. You're wrapped in animal skin, armed with bone tools, and you've just turned a chunk of dead caribou into cutting-edge protective eyewear. Take that, Ray-Ban. The day stretches out before you, long, frozen, and bright beyond belief. But your eyes, they're ready. You step out onto the open ice, and it hits you immediately. This eerie, silent brightness that seems to come from all directions at once. The sky is pale. The snow is white. The air itself feels like it's glowing. And through your freshly carved goggles, the world is sliced into narrow glimpses. Two horizontal slits that make you feel like you're peeking into a secret dimension. You take a few steps forward, testing your balance. The snow crunches under your feet, the sound muffled by layers of fur and hide. The goggles work. The slits block the blinding light, filtering it into something manageable, even calming. It's like walking through a dream someone forgot to color in. This is the moment where you finally get it. The slits aren't just there to block light, they're transforming it. You notice detail you'd otherwise miss. The subtle curve of a snowdrift, the faint track of a hare bounding away, the shimmer of heatless sunlight catching on the edge of a frozen pool. In this flattened, reflective world, those tiny slits are the difference between clarity and chaos. You squint through them again and tilt your head. The depth perception is still there, surprisingly sharp. You can judge distance better now than you could without the goggles. The narrowing of your vision actually sharpens your spatial awareness. It's counterintuitive, like putting on blinders and suddenly seeing more. Historians still argue whether the slit design was originally inspired by observing how squinting helped reduce glare, or whether it stemmed from mimicking certain animal eyes. Some Arctic animals have horizontally slit pupils, after all. But either way, the result is the same. These goggles work, and they've been working for thousands of years. You reach up to adjust the goggles slightly. They're snug, comfortable, warm against your skin. You've lined the inner edge with a strip of softened fur to keep the frost from sticking to your face. It's a little detail you're proud of. Function meet comfort. You think back to the modern sunglasses you used to wear. Mirror-coated, polarized, $200 price tag. They scratched if you looked at them wrong, and when you lost them in a taxi or a tide pool, that was it. But these you made with your hands, from what you hunted. These goggles wouldn't break if you dropped them. You could feed your dogs with the same tools you used to make them. Further along the ice, you see another hunter approaching, his face barely visible beneath the layers of hood and fur. But his goggles catch the light. They're bone, like yours, but shaped slightly differently. His slits are narrower, and the outer edge is painted with something dark, burnt seal fat, maybe. You nod in silent greeting. Goggle envy is real out here. He lifts his hand and holds up a spare pair. You step closer. He lets you examine them. These ones are older, worn smooth. The slits have been adjusted over time, filed down again and again, customized for whoever wore them last. There are tiny carvings etched along the sides, maybe clan symbols, maybe just decoration. You don't ask. Some things are private. He grunts approvingly at yours. Sharp slits, he says. That's high praise. You return the compliment. It's the most Arctic version of talking about someone's sneakers you've ever experienced. As the two of you walk together, you share stories, mostly in nods and single-syllable words. About a polar bear that came too close last week. About the ice cracking near the inlet. About a pair of goggles lost in the snow and never found again. That last one gets a wince. No joke. Losing your goggles is like losing your eyes. Later, you sit on an overturned sled and watch as the sun arcs slowly across the sky. If you can even call it an arc. It feels like a ceiling light left on too long. You imagine being stuck out here without goggles, just your bare eyes against all this reflective madness. You remember reading somewhere that snow blindness doesn't kick in right away. It sneaks up on you. First, your eyes water. Then they itch. Then burn. Then you start seeing halos, like everyone's suddenly become an angel. And by the time you realize something's wrong, it's too late. You're sitting in a snowbank crying, unable to open your eyes, let alone make your way home. It's not uncommon. Even today, people who trek to polar regions sometimes forget just how aggressive the light can be. They bring fancy gear, sure, but if they lose it, or break it, or forget it, well, let's just say your handmade bone goggles are suddenly a lot more fashionable. And they've always been more than just survival tools. There's a strange beauty in their simplicity. Just a thin strip of bone, a couple of slits, and a bit of cord. That's it. But they're elegant, balanced, like someone designed them with intention. And they did. You stand up and brush the snow off your legs. The hunter is gone now, his dog team already fading into the horizon. But you feel a kind of kinship with him, a shared understanding that the world isn't made for your eyes. You have to adapt. You have to work with what the earth gives you. Bone, snow, light, and the wisdom to turn those things into something useful. You tug your hood tighter and head toward camp. The wind has picked up, but you're not bothered. The goggles cut through the glare. The snow dances around you like powdered stars. And for a second, just a second, you forget you're in a frozen desert at the top of the world. Because everything's clear, focused, soft. 2 slits, 1 pair of goggles, 1,000 years of wisdom resting on your nose. You're sitting inside your shelter again, thawing your fingers over a small flame fueled by whale oil, when you notice something. Your goggles are kind of beautiful. Not just they work beautiful. Not just they saved my eyeballs beautiful. No, these things have style. You turn them over in your hands, letting the firelight glint off the smooth bone surface. The slits are precise. The edges are curved just enough to feel intentional. There's a faint pattern scratched along the top. A zigzag, maybe? Could be decorative. Could be symbolic. Or maybe someone got bored one night and decided to doodle on their safety gear. Either way, it makes you smile. And now you're seeing it everywhere. Your cousin's goggles, made from dark driftwood, have tiny shell inlays along the sides. Your aunt wears a pair shaped from polished walrus ivory with 2 notches that form an almost cat-eye curve at the temples. Function and flair, very Arctic chic. Here's the thing most people don't know. Inuit snow goggles weren't just about protection. They were expressions of personality, status, and craftsmanship, like watches, or shoes, or customized gaming PCs, except they helped you not go blind. You pull out a new piece of ivory. It's smooth, creamy, cool to the touch. Harvested months ago, cleaned and soaked, ready for shaping. Walrus ivory is prized, not just for its durability, but for its polish. It reflects light in a way that makes even a utilitarian object feel luxurious. If Gucci had a polar division, this would be their material of choice. You sketch a rough design with the tip of your knife, a longer sweep across the brow, like a visor, tighter slits angled slightly for better peripheral vision. And maybe, a bold move here, a pair of tiny holes at the sides, just for airflow. Not traditional, but your breath tends to fog things up, and you like experimenting. Historians still argue whether these ornate goggles served ceremonial purposes or were purely practical. Some say they were worn in rites of passage. Others insist the fancier ones were status symbols, a way of saying, I can hunt and accessorize. But maybe both things can be true. Humans are humans, even at 40 below. You begin carving, more confident now. The shavings fall into your lap like dry snow. You hum to yourself, something rhythmic, the same melody your grandmother used to sing when stitching boots. Out here, work and rhythm go hand in hand. Someone calls your name from outside. You duck your head out and see your younger brother, goggles askew, cheeks flushed from the cold. He's found an old goggle frame, cracked down the middle but still intact. You take it from him and study the design. The slits are wider than usual, too wide. You can see now why it didn't last. Still, the craftsmanship is fascinating. It has grooves etched into the temples, possibly to hold small decorative beads. There's a faded red pigment stained into the wood, probably iron-rich ochre. Not functional at all, pure art. You imagine someone wearing these on a clear spring day, maybe during a festival, showing off a little. And why not? The snow might be relentless, but the people who live beneath it, they have style. They make beauty out of necessity. You return to your own goggles, now half finished. You decide to add your own touch, a small carved seal near the bridge. It's rough, and it doesn't look like much yet, but you know what it is. That's enough. Back at the fire, your uncle shows you his goggles. They're the oldest pair you've ever seen, not just worn, weathered. One side is slightly warped, as if it melted near a fire and was reshaped by hand. The slits are uneven now, but still usable. He tells you they once belonged to his great-grandfather, passed down through 4 generations. Each person made small adjustments. Each person added something. There's history in these objects, not just the kind you read in books, but the kind that lives in muscle memory and calloused hands. You can feel it when you hold them. 1,000 tiny decisions made by people who refused to let the snow steal their sight. You wonder if, someday, someone will wear your goggles. Maybe they'll notice the seal carving and think about who you were. Maybe they'll laugh at the shape. Some future kid wearing laser visor goggles with built-in AI will find your work charmingly primitive. Or maybe, just maybe, they'll put them on and think, hey, these still work. You finish sanding the ivory with a scrap of dried fish skin, smooth as silk. The slits are perfect. You tie the sinew cords tight and try them on. A snug fit. The world narrows, sharpens. Everything becomes calm, clear. You step outside, showing off a little. Your cousin whistles, impressed. Stylish, she says. You give a dramatic nod, like you're walking a runway. The snow runway, 1200 AD. The dogs bark. The sled creaks. And all around you, a whole community is doing the same. Carving, shaping, decorating. Not because they have to, but because they can. Because even in the harshest place on Earth, humans don't stop creating. You look across the frozen expanse, light spilling off the ice like liquid glass. And thanks to your custom-made, ivory-carved, soot-darkened goggles, it's not blinding anymore. It's beautiful. You don't even realize it at first. You're walking along the ridge above the frozen inlet, goggles snug, breathing steady, dogs behind you. It's a calm day. No wind, no blowing snow, just miles of open light. Then it starts. Your eyes feel dry. Not a big deal. Maybe the cold, maybe the wind. But then you blink, and it's like someone rubbed chalk dust into your vision. Things look off, like your world has a filter on it, and not a flattering one. You slow your pace. Within a few minutes, the itch begins. It's deep, behind the eyes, not something you can scratch or blink away. Your temples throb. You try to squint, but you're already squinting. Your goggles are still hanging around your neck. That was your first mistake. This is snow blindness. Real snow blindness. The kind no YouTube thumbnail prepares you for. You sit down carefully, taking slow breaths. Your head feels heavy. You know what's coming. And the worst part? There's nothing to do but ride it out. You pull your hood over your face, goggles back on. But it's too late. The damage is done. You lie there, eyes shut, your body bundled in skins, heart drumming quietly. The dogs curl beside you, confused. You mutter to yourself, not curses, just apologies. You knew better. You made goggles. And still, for just one lazy moment, you thought, I'll be fine. Historians still argue about how widespread snow blindness was in pre-modern Arctic communities. Some suggest it was a regular hazard that everyone faced sooner or later. Others believe it was a rare mistake, a kind of rookie error only a distracted or careless traveler would make. Either way, the consequences were serious. You remember hearing the old story from your grandmother. A young hunter caught out on the ice, hours from camp, no goggles. He came back crawling, eyes swollen shut, guided only by the sound of the wind and the barking of his lead dog. He couldn't see for 3 days. He couldn't hunt for 10. In a place like this, that's not just a problem. It's a threat to survival. The symptoms vary. Some feel a burning, like hot sand behind the eyelids. Others describe it as a white fog that refuses to lift. In the worst cases, the corneas become inflamed, red, blistered. You don't lose your sight forever, usually. But while it lasts, snow blindness is pure misery. You curl deeper into your hood, eyes shut. The snow presses soft against your side. The light behind your eyelids pulses faintly, like the memory of a sun that won't leave you alone. When you finally open your eyes again, tentatively, it's dark. Not night dark, just dimmer. Cloud cover has rolled in, a gentle gift. You grope for your sled, for the cord around your waist, and for your pride, which is somewhere buried under 2 feet of self-inflicted stupidity. You pull the goggles on again, tight this time. They're warm from being tucked inside your parka. The slits narrow your vision, but now that feels comforting, like blinkers on a nervous horse. Focus, forward, less light, less pain. You begin the slow walk back to camp, not hurried, just steady. 1 foot, then the other. Each step accompanied by the muffled pat of snow and the low jingle of gear on your sled. You think about how you'll tell the story later. Maybe you won't. Maybe it'll just live here, in the part of your brain reserved for never again lessons. It's humbling, this place. Even with goggles, even with knowledge passed down for generations, you're never invincible. The land always has the last word, and sometimes that word is ouch. By the time you reach camp, your vision has mostly cleared. The burning is gone. But your ego? Still singed. You sit near the fire, letting the warmth crawl back into your fingers. Someone hands you a bowl of something hot and greasy, probably boiled seal. You slurp it without complaint. Across the circle, your brother is repairing a torn boot, his goggles resting on his forehead like a crown. You catch his eye, and he grins. "Forgot your slits?" he asks. You grunt. For 5 minutes. He raises a knowing brow. 5 minutes is all it takes. He's right. 5 minutes of naked eyeballs in high reflective snow can cost you a week of recovery and a lifetime of embarrassment. You nod silently, accepting the Arctic's latest life lesson. Later, you dig into your pack and pull out a spare piece of bone. Just a strip, rough, unfinished. You sit by the fire and begin carving another pair, not because you need it, because someone else might. Because you now understand why people made extra goggles. You carve slowly, deliberately. These slits will be narrower, tighter, a little extra soot, a better curve across the nose. This pair will live in your coat, always. And you realize something else. These goggles, primitive as they seem, aren't optional accessories. They're as essential as your boots or your knife. Not just helpful, not just nice to have. Necessary. The people who figured this out, centuries ago, with no textbooks or UV warnings or ophthalmologists, were brilliant. They saw the problem. They felt the pain. And they shaped a solution from bone and instinct. That's innovation. And it's not just smart, it's human. You finish the new goggles and set them aside. They're simple, functional, unadorned. No carvings, no flair, just the basics. A reminder that sometimes the plainest things are the ones that save you. You lean back, gaze into the fire, and let your eyes rest. Not because they're sore anymore, but because they've earned it. And next time you step out onto the ice, your goggles will already be on. The next morning, you're already on the move. The dogs are harnessed and restless, their paws patting patterns into the snow. Your sled creaks as it lurches forward, cutting clean tracks behind you. Ahead, the horizon is flat, wide, and so white it borders on the surreal. You're wrapped in fur and bone, your face tucked behind layers of skin and snow-dusted fabric. But the real hero, once again, is strapped to your face, your goggles. You look through the slits and see a world in focus. Narrow, measured, protected. Every light-reflecting surface has been neutralized. What once was blinding now glows softly, like moonlight on milk. You feel steady, capable. The Arctic hasn't changed. You have. You guide the sled over a frozen riverbed, your gloved hand gripping the handlebar. The dogs know the route. An old trail marked by memory and subtle changes in snow texture that only they seem to notice. You scan the horizon. Not for danger, not really, but for rhythm, for familiarity, for home. That's when you begin to notice something strange. The way your vision feels. Sharper. Not just protected, enhanced. The slits in your goggles don't just block light. They direct it, channel it. Your eyes adjust to this focused view, and your brain, clever as ever, starts filling in the rest. You spot a seal's breathing hole half buried in drifted snow, a flicker in the white landscape. You wouldn't have noticed it without the goggles forcing you to focus. It's not just about seeing less, it's about seeing better. Historians still argue whether Inuit slit goggles influenced later developments in optical science. Some say they were an isolated invention. Others suggest they share principles with the pinhole camera, which wouldn't be formally studied until centuries later. Either way, what's clear is this: the technology works. And not just for Arctic travel. You've probably noticed this phenomenon before, without even realizing it. Ever squint at something far away, and suddenly it comes into focus? Your eyelashes close in, your eyelids narrow the field of light, and bam, pinhole optics in action. What the Inuit built into wearable bone tech, you've been doing instinctively with your face. As you ride along, you reflect on that. On how many modern inventions come from moments like this. Not breakthroughs in a lab, but clever, quiet solutions shaped by experience and need. There's a beauty in it. And in this case, it's literally carved into history. The dogs bark suddenly, turning slightly. You shift your weight and steer. Up ahead, the snow thickens into a low fog, a whiteout. Visibility drops. The horizon disappears. You're in the middle of a snow globe that someone shook too hard. But your goggles, still doing their job. Through the slits, the swirling chaos of the whiteout becomes manageable. Your limited vision makes it easier to focus. You don't panic. You don't spin. You track. The snow can't distract you. You stay locked on the path, each dog's tail just visible, your sled steady behind them. It's strange how a tool that limits vision actually frees you. You're less overwhelmed. You stop trying to see everything. You only see what matters. That's the genius of the slit goggles. They don't give you a perfect image. They give you a usable one. When you're crossing the Arctic, that's all you need. Maybe that's all any of us need. Eventually, the snowstorm lightens. The fog lifts. The world slowly returns. And you're exactly where you meant to be, coasting toward a low outcrop where the ice gives way to a sheltered hunting ground. You unstrap the goggles just briefly to rub your face. The light hits your eyes like a surprise party you didn't ask for. You flinch. Lesson relearned. You snap the goggles back on. At camp, you compare stories with the others. One traveler tells of using soot in the slits to reduce internal glare. Another shares a trick for keeping the goggles from freezing to your skin. Line them with rabbit fur. A third has carved mirrored designs into the outer face of her goggles, not for function, just flair. Everyone's experimenting. Everyone's improving. The design is shared, sure, but also individual, regional, personalized. You hear stories of goggle styles from across the Arctic, from Alaska to Greenland to Siberia. Some are long and flat. Others are narrow and high, like bird beaks. Materials vary. Bone, wood, antler, shell. But the principle is the same. Slit vision saves eyes. You look across the camp and see a kid practicing with a new pair. He stumbles a bit, unused to the limited view. His grandmother watches, chuckling. "He'll learn," she says, "or he'll go blind for a day, and then he'll learn." Classic Arctic education. You lie back in the snow, letting the cold soak through your coat. Your goggles rest gently on your face, still slightly warm from your breath. The clouds have cleared, and now the sky stretches above you in a sheet of shimmering pale blue. The sun hangs like a distant god. You're staring straight at it, through slits, through soot, through 1,000 years of invention. And your eyes are just fine. Not bad for a piece of carved bone. As the dogs curl beside you, as the wind quiets to a soft hum, you realize something. You've adapted. You've learned. The goggles aren't just a tool anymore. They're part of you. Like your boots, your knife, your instincts. They've changed how you see the world. And in doing so, They've helped you survive it. You're lying flat on your back now, not moving. Not from exhaustion, but from stillness. Intentional stillness. Above you, the Arctic sky is painted with that weird pastel glow that only happens near the poles. Half sun, half moonlight, all surreal. Your breath escapes in soft clouds, drifting into the air like tiny ghosts. The snow beneath you doesn't melt. It molds gently to your body. You take off your goggles just for a moment. Let the world flood in, bright, unfiltered, and full of risk. You squint hard, eyes barely open, just to feel it again. The rush of too much, the blur of infinity. Then, slowly, you lower your eyelids and slide the goggles back into place. And like magic, the chaos sharpens. The land becomes real again, measurable, textured, even intimate. Through the slits, the world isn't overwhelming. It's calm, focused, sacred. Because here's what no one really talks about. These goggles weren't just practical. They were spiritual. You've heard the stories. Elders whispering around the seal oil lamp about how snowlight doesn't just blind you, it can unbalance your soul. That light this pure, this white, this endless, isn't meant to be taken in all at once. That your body isn't built for it, but neither is your spirit. And so, the goggles became more than a tool. They became a ritual, a boundary between the physical world and something stranger, older, quieter. You sit up slowly and look out over the landscape. From up here, everything looks sculpted, like a giant hand pressed soft fingerprints into the snow. You can see the faint trail of your sled below. The wind has already started to erase it, reshaping the path like it was never there. You reach into your coat and pull out a small amulet, a carved piece of ivory, shaped like a seal's head. Not much to it, but it belonged to your grandmother. She always kept it tied to her goggles, dangling like a quiet companion. Said it helped her focus. Said it reminded her not to look too hard at the light. Historians still argue whether this kind of spiritual attachment to objects, especially practical ones like goggles, was widespread among Arctic peoples. Was it belief? Was it habit? Was it something in between? But as you sit here now, seal amulet in hand, goggles pressing softly against your temples, you think, does it matter? Because there's something undeniably meditative about narrowing your vision on purpose, choosing not to see everything, letting yourself not know what's out there just for a while. You stand up and walk slowly across the ridge. The snow squeaks beneath your boots. The sky flickers with strange colors. Aurora, maybe. Or maybe it's just your eyes adjusting again. Below, you spot a group gathering around the fire. They're preparing for a naming ceremony. A new child, wrapped in caribou and cradled in a hollowed sealskin, lies nestled in the arms of her mother. One of the elders wears a particularly ornate pair of goggles, walrus ivory, inlaid with small stones. The slits are outlined with dark soot, like makeup. Ceremony goggles. You watch from a distance. The voices are low. The fire crackles softly. One by one, the family members whisper something over the child, each time placing their hands on her forehead, just for a moment. The elder with the goggles never removes them. She sees this world through slits, always. Maybe it keeps her grounded. Maybe it keeps the spirits from overwhelming her. The ceremony ends quietly, and the group begins to disperse. A few head toward the fishing hole, a few back toward the sleds. The baby sleeps on. You walk down to the fire, feeling its heat before you reach it. The elder looks up at you and says, without greeting, "Your slits are too wide." You pause, then smile. "I know." She nods once, satisfied, then points to the sky. Too much light makes people think they're invincible. Then she chuckles softly, until they walk off a cliff. You sit with her for a while. No talking, just fire, goggles, and that weird Arctic silence that feels heavier than most silences. You catch yourself blinking, almost forgetting that behind the goggles, you can see clearly. You've stopped noticing the limits. That's when you know they've become part of you. Later, you return to your own sled, your own camp. You lie back again, letting the fire fade, your dogs curled nearby. The sky glows overhead. Never night. Not really. Just less day. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you feel grateful. Not just for sight, not just for warmth, but for slits. Two narrow windows that let in just enough of the world to keep it real, and just little enough to keep it from devouring you. You're back on the move. This time, it's a hunting trip, not just a quick dash across the tundra, but a multi-day journey across jagged ice fields and frozen rivers. The kind where the sun never dips. Your sled groans under weight, and you sleep with one eye open for polar bears. You've got seal meat packed in bundles. Your dogs are lean and eager, and your gear, meticulously checked, includes your most trusted possession, your goggles. They're not the prettiest pair anymore. The bone is slightly stained. One corner has a chip where you dropped them that time near the inlet, but they fit your face like a second skin. These goggles aren't fashion. They're a promise. Day 1. The light is manageable. The sky is overcast, the snow soft. You travel through rolling drifts and across open plains, your eyes relaxed behind those carved slits. There's a strange comfort in how little you see. Just a sliver of horizon at any one moment. It slows you down, sure, but it also sharpens everything. Then comes day 2. The clouds clear overnight, and now the sun is everywhere. Above you, behind you, beneath you, bouncing up from every angle. The ice has turned into a mirror the size of a continent. It's the kind of light that makes shadows feel aggressive. You see your dogs flinch. Even with their protective fur, they squint. You've wrapped cloth around their eyes, but it only helps so much. You're grateful, deeply grateful, for your goggles. You pull them tighter, double-check the sinew cords. You've lined them with a touch of charcoal. The slits feel narrower today, and that's exactly what you need. Historians still argue whether slit size was standardized in certain communities. Some claim regional norms, Baffin slits versus Siberian slits. Others argue it was always individual, the result of experience and adjustment. What's agreed on, though, is that the narrower the slit, the more intense the sun. And today? Today is narrow slit weather. You and your team move slowly, cautiously. The dogs are good, alert, responsive, but they're not magicians. The land changes quickly out here. A snow ridge becomes a crevasse. A flat stretch turns slick with invisible black ice. But through the slits, the glare becomes texture. The blank becomes a map. You can see the shimmer where the snow is thin, the dull gray where it's packed and safe. Details that would be lost in the flood of full-spectrum sunlight become clear through these focused lines. You pause for a break near a small ice outcrop. You sip from a pouch of melted snow, tasting leather and salt. Across the ridge, another hunter is approaching. He's wearing a different style of goggles entirely. Wood, maybe birch. The slits are vertical, not horizontal. You blink, curious. You meet at the edge of the ridge and exchange nods. He lifts his goggles, revealing red-rimmed eyes and a sheepish grin. Too wide, he mutters, tapping them. Made these in a rush. You trade for a moment, try on his, let him try on yours. His view feels off. More light, yes, but less control. It's like opening your phone brightness to 100% in a dark room. You hand them back and suggest he file the slits tighter tonight. He nods, already pulling out a bone tool. These are field repairs, real-time evolution. Nothing about these goggles is set in stone. They're living designs. You adjust. You learn. You squint. You file. Later that evening, as camp is being set, you sit by the fire and work on a new idea, adding a second layer of material behind the slits, maybe something translucent, bladder lining maybe, or thin skin, something to diffuse light even further without blocking visibility. You don't know if it'll work. But the beauty of this culture, of any oral tradition with hands-on craft, is experimentation. The elders expect you to try. The worst thing you can do is assume the current way is the only way. One of the elders joins you. She's ancient, quiet, but sharp-eyed. She sees what you're doing and smiles, a slow one. Used to put fish glue over the slits, she says. Dried it in the sun, made them smoky. You blink. That's new. You make a mental note. Fish glue goggles. File under things I never thought I'd consider. She leans closer. Goggles aren't just to see. They're to teach you how to see. You sit with that for a while, because she's right. Wearing goggles like these doesn't just change what you see. It changes how you look. You stop scanning. You stop panicking. You move slowly. You notice detail, texture, pattern. You give up the illusion of seeing everything so you can actually understand something. The next morning, you try out the fish glue idea. You smear a thin layer on a test pair and hold them up to the light. Not bad. A little hazy, but softer. You can imagine this helping on windless, brutally sunny days, or during spring melt, when the landscape becomes one huge disco ball of glare. You think about all the materials you haven't tried yet. Mica, dark mosses, even smoke-stained hide. All potential future upgrades to the ancient, perfect form. And that's the point. The goggles aren't finished. They've never been finished. Every pair you carve, Every tweak you make is just one more voice in a long, unbroken conversation across centuries. A dialogue between light and bone, between need and innovation. And so, as you pack up camp and slip your goggles back on for another day of navigating brightness, you feel something deeper than gratitude. You feel connected to the light, to the land, to everyone who ever squinted and thought, there's got to be a better way. The sled bumps gently as it moves along the edge of a frozen bay where the sea ice groans like it's dreaming. The dogs keep a steady rhythm, their paws leaving neat little prints in the snow. You, on the other hand, are slightly distracted, your fingers tracing the sides of your goggles as you move, not because something's wrong, but because something's clicking. There's a realization setting in. These goggles, the humble, hand-carved slits of bone pressed gently to your face, aren't just survival gear anymore. They're a philosophy, a design so elegant, so ridiculously efficient, that you start noticing echoes of it everywhere. You glance up and catch the sun skimming the horizon, still refusing to set. Through your goggles, it softens into an oval glow, manageable, less aggressive. You wonder how many other things in life would be easier to face through a narrower lens. Today's trail winds along a chain of ridges and then dips into a shallow valley where you stop to give the dogs a rest. While they doze, you sit back on your sled, sipping tepid tea, and your mind drifts, not to the next destination, but back in time. You've heard stories of ancient goggles discovered buried in old hunting camps, preserved in permafrost. One in particular, found on King William Island, was so perfectly intact it still had the sinew cords attached. The slits were narrow, almost invisible from the front. A minimalist masterpiece. Historians dated it back hundreds of years, long before polar explorers arrived with their brass compasses and wool uniforms and promptly got frostbite. No one taught the Inuit how to make goggles. They just figured it out, and then passed that wisdom down, one generation to the next, quietly, carefully. You imagine the first maker, somewhere deep in the past, squinting against the spring sun, filing tiny slits into the edge of a seal bone, and testing the result with one eye open. Historians still argue whether these early goggle makers were individual tinkerers or part of larger tool-making traditions. Some scholars suggest they were the domain of hunters only. Others believe women, especially seamstresses and carvers, were involved in shaping and refining the designs. You'd believe either, or both. That's how cultures work, interwoven threads. Beside you, your cousin is trying on a new pair he just carved from driftwood. They're angular, boxier than yours. The slits are etched at a downward angle, like a hawk's eyes. He calls them storm goggles. You trade for a minute and try them on. The view is sharp, focused straight ahead with a downward cast, perfect for trudging through wind-swept trails. You hand them back, impressed. You'll scare off the sun, you joke. He shrugs. Maybe that's the point. As the dogs stir, ready to move again, you recheck your own goggles. Slits still clean, fit still tight. You start noticing the little differences in every pair around you. This one flares at the edges. That one's tied with a double braid. Some have leather spacers to lift them slightly off the face. Others sit flush to the skin for maximum seal. And here's the kicker. There's no wrong version, just preferences. just context. Just people adapting to different faces, different jobs, different light. It's not unlike modern glasses, really. Only instead of brands and pricing tiers, the Inuit had snow types and latitude. Dry powder versus crusty windpack. Low-angled sun versus high-reflection spring glare. You tuned your goggles the way a photographer tunes a lens. Except your studio was 10,000 square kilometers of ice. And while you're thinking about all this, materials, variations, ancient design, you catch yourself doing something unexpected. You're proud, not just of your own pair, but of being part of this quiet lineage, of having learned a tool so deeply that it feels natural, seamless, like something your bones remembered before your hands did. And it is in your bones, in a way. That memory, that instinct to protect your sight with the simplest, smartest trick imaginable. A trick born of desperation, honed by practice, elevated by creativity. You reach the crest of the next ridge and pause. The land opens up beneath you. Miles of snowfields glittering under relentless sun. It would be blinding without your goggles. But instead, it's peaceful. Like a canvas stretched out just for you. You slide your goggles slightly down your nose and squint at the raw light for a second, just to feel it. Then you pull them back up and sigh. Satisfied, shielded, safe. And in that moment, you think of something small but powerful. The best tools in the world don't shout. They whisper. They sit close to your skin, ask nothing, and quietly change everything. By now, you wear the goggles without thinking. They're part of your face, part of your coat, part of your day. You don't notice the slight weight of them anymore, or the faint line they leave on your cheeks after long hours in the snow. They're just there. And that's the beauty of a perfect design. It disappears. Today, you're on sea ice, flat, endless, and slick as glass. The kind of terrain that makes you feel like a tiny smudge on the edge of a white plate. There's no wind, no sound, just the rhythmic crunch of dog paws and sled runners behind them. You pull your hood tighter, feel the frost stiffening your eyelashes, and glance down at your reflection in the ice. For a second, you see the goggles looking back at you, bone against bone, human adaptation against planetary indifference. You chuckle, quietly. If this place had its way, you'd be blind, frozen, or long gone. But you're not. You're thriving. Because of two tiny slits in a scrap of carved ivory. You make camp near a pressure ridge that looks like frozen surf. Jagged shards of ice have thrust upward, leaning into each other like drunks at last call. You unpack your gear, pitch your tent, and begin your favorite part of the day, tinkering. You pull out a half-finished pair of goggles you've been shaping over the past few days. They're made from a whale rib this time, lightweight, tough, and wide enough to offer better coverage. You smooth the slits a little more, adjust the curve over the nose, a small notch at the temples for airflow. Clean, elegant, simple genius. As you work, an elder from a neighboring camp approaches. He's wearing the oldest pair of goggles you've ever seen. Cracked wood, wrapped in hide, the slits barely more than scratches. He sits beside you and watches your hands move. These, he says, tapping his own goggles, were my father's. You pause. Still work? He grins, toothless. Better than me. You both laugh, and then you fall into an easy silence, just shaping and sanding, the way two people do when there's nothing left to prove. Eventually, he holds out your new pair, turning them over in his weathered fingers. Good balance, he says. But maybe the slits should be angled down just a little. You frown. Why? He gestures at the sun. That glare comes from below. Ice reflects up. You stare at him, blink, then look through your goggles again. He's right. It's subtle, but he's right. The angle catches just enough extra light that your eyes feel it after a few hours. You file the slits again. Tiny adjustment, but huge difference. Historians still argue whether goggle craftsmanship was centralized or decentralized, whether a few specialists carved them for whole villages, or whether everyone made their own. You're starting to think it didn't matter, because the learning wasn't about who carved them. It was about how the knowledge moved, quietly, patiently, across hands, across fires, across centuries. You and the elder pass the goggles back and forth, testing different angles, discussing techniques. You trade materials. He shows you how to notch with a sharpened fish rib instead of metal. You show him your idea for layered slits, a thin hide behind the bone to soften wind gusts without losing focus. It's not formal instruction. There's no workshop, no certificate. Just two people carving toward the same thing. Vision. Later that night, you watch the stars through the slit of your tent. The fire outside burns low, and your dogs are curled in a heap like a living blanket. You think about how strange it is that something so small, so basic, can feel so profound. These goggles are, technically, a limitation. They reduce your field of view. They cut out light. They make you slower, more deliberate. But that's not how it feels. They feel like clarity, like control, like choosing what to see. In a world this big, this brutal, that choice is everything. You run your fingers along the edge of your newest pair, now finished. The bone is smooth, the cords neatly tied. You lift them to your face and gaze through the slits into the darkness beyond the tent flap. You can see the firelight flickering. You can see the ridges of snow sculpted by the wind. You can see just enough. And that's the trick, isn't it? Modern life chases perfect clarity, panoramic visibility, infinite information. But here, where too much light can blind you and too much exposure can kill you, the wisdom is reversed. You don't need to see everything. You just need to see what matters. You roll onto your side and let the goggles rest beside you, close enough to grab if the weather turns in the night. Outside, a distant howl echoes across the ice. Not wolves. Wind. You close your eyes. In the warmth of your tent, in the company of ancient design, you feel safe. Not because the world is easy, but because you've learned how to look at it. You wake to the familiar sound of snow shifting under paws and the soft chuffing of your lead dog, who's decided it's time to move. The cold hits your face like a gentle slap the moment you peel open the tent. Another day, another slab of brilliant, blinding light stretched across an endless white canvas. But you're ready. The goggles go on without ceremony. They're not glamorous anymore. They're smudged, slightly warped from campfire heat, and permanently imprinted with the curve of your own brow. But the second you slip them over your eyes, the world narrows into something understandable, navigable, yours. Today's journey takes you over sea ice fractured into jigsaw puzzles, with ridges and crevasses that demand careful navigation. There's a rhythm to it. Glance, adjust, guide the sled, correct the dogs, repeat. Through the slits, you notice subtle shadows that reveal dangerous hollows. Light behaves differently through these tiny windows. It becomes obedient, tamed. You think about how strange it is that the very thing meant to limit your sight is what helps you see best. At midday, you stop for dried meat and melted snow, your hands too stiff to enjoy either. As you chew, you spot something off in the distance, a glint. Not the usual kind, not the glimmer of sun on snow. This has form, structure. You squint through your slits. A person, sitting alone on a rock, half covered in snowdrift. No movement, no sled. You approach carefully. As you draw near, the figure resolves into an elder, bundled in old-style furs with goggles hanging loosely around their neck. They're humming something, soft, tuneless. You offer a greeting. They nod slowly, eyes still distant. You ask if they're okay, and they gesture to the sun. Too much light, they say. It got to me. You sit beside them. Wait. Eventually, they lift the goggles and pass them to you. You study them. Wooden frame, thick cords, slits barely more than thread lines. Each surface etched with spirals and tiny animals. Ravens, fish, caribou. Not just functional. Sacred. Made these when I was 16, the elder murmurs. You hand them back. They put the goggles on and blink. Better, they say. And then, as if summoned back to earth by that single act, they rise. Slowly, carefully. Together, you walk back toward your camp. Step by step, they return to the world. Historians still argue whether snow goggles held social significance, if they were markers of age, status, or rite of passage. There's no consensus. But sitting next to that elder, sharing silence and slits in the sun, you feel the answer in your bones. These goggles are rites. They represent that moment when you stop being overwhelmed by the world and start learning how to meet it on your own terms. At camp that night, the elder tells stories of how they first learned to file bone without cracking it, of carving slits too wide and ending up half blind for 3 days, of goggles lost to storms, to jealous cousins, to curious dogs with strong jaws. Each story ends with a quiet chuckle and a truth. I made another pair. You find yourself nodding. That's how the culture survives. Not because it's static, but because it's stubborn. Break something, make another. Learn, adjust, keep moving. After the stories fade and the fire dies down, you sit alone, goggles still on. The stars have returned, shivering pinpricks in the sky. The slits let you see them one at a time, like choosing constellations from a catalog. You stare into the dark until your eyes begin to rest. Not close, not asleep, just rest. The kind of stillness that only comes when your vision is filtered, focused, when you're not expected to take in everything all the time. You think of your earliest pair, clumsy, wide, over-sanded, and how proud you were of them. You think of the pairs you've made since, and the ones you'll make again. You think of how the design will outlive you, will pass to other hands, shaped by new needs, new eyes, new light. That's the legacy, not the object, but the way of seeing. The knowledge that the world will always be too bright, too sharp, too much. And the quiet defiance of carving a line into bone and saying, "No, I'll look at it this way." Your sled creaks as it comes to a stop near the ice edge, where land gives way to the frozen sea. The horizon blurs into a white haze, and for a long while, you just sit still, breathing, watching, listening. The dogs settle into the snow, their noses tucked beneath their tails. Even the wind holds its breath. You lift your goggles, just slightly, and the sun floods in, savage and immediate. You wince, then lower them back into place. Peace returns. This isn't a hunting trip or a supply run. It's something quieter, a kind of pilgrimage. You've come to leave something behind. In your sled bag is an old pair of goggles, your first real attempt years ago. Wide slits, uneven sides, but sturdy. You remember carving them by lamplight, hands aching, eyes unsure. You remember the first time they saved you from the sun, how the landscape stopped attacking your vision and started guiding it instead. They've served you well, but they're not for wearing anymore. They've become something else. You walk out across the ice shelf, the goggles in your hand, fingers tracing the familiar curve of the bone. You find a quiet spot, a ridge overlooking the melt pools below. There, you dig a small hollow in the snow, not to bury the goggles, but to offer them back. Not everything in this land is about utility. Some things, even the most practical, deserve reverence. You place the goggles inside, along with a strip of sinew and a tiny carved fish, just enough to say thank you. You cover the offering lightly, not to hide it, but to let the wind decide what happens next. And then you sit back, resting in the snow, staring through your current goggles at the endless horizon. The Arctic doesn't change. You do. As you sit there, you think about all the other pairs of goggles scattered across this landscape, lost in snowstorms, buried in old campsites, passed from hand to hand. There's no museum that holds them all, no archive, just memory, tradition, and the wind. Historians still argue whether Inuit snow goggles influenced any non-Arctic technologies. Did they inspire modern sunglasses? Did explorers adapt the slit principle into early optical science? No one can prove it. But the idea persists, because it makes sense, because it works, and because sometimes the world's most advanced tool is a piece of bone carved by someone who never saw a blueprint. Back at camp, you share the story with a younger traveler. He's just made his first pair. Pine slats, leather ties, a little crooked, but they fit. He squints through them proudly, laughing when he walks into a tent pole. You hand him a small file. "Angle the slits down a little," you say. The glare will get you by noon. He nods, already sitting down to begin. This is how it continues. Not through textbooks, but through fingertips. Through sunburned faces and quiet adjustments, and whispered advice by the fire. As night falls, or what passes for night in this place, you sit with the others around the lamp. Some have goggles hanging at their necks. Others still wear them, out of habit. There's a rhythm to the group, like everyone slightly squinting at the world in the same way, filtering the chaos into something livable. You realize then, you're part of an unbroken chain, not just of survival, but of refinement, of looking into the sun and saying, not like that, like this. The wind picks up. Snow whispers against the tent. Someone stokes the fire. You pull your coat tighter, feel the goggles shift against your face. And in the warmth and light of the moment, you let your vision narrow. Not because you're afraid of the world, but because you've learned how to see it, one slit at a time. You're still now. The dogs are asleep. The fire has gone to embers. The cold has wrapped itself around the tent in a silent embrace. And inside, it's quiet. Not just from the absence of sound, but from the slowing of your thoughts, the soft release of all that came before. Your goggles lie beside you, curved like a smile in the dim light. You won't need them again tonight. Outside, the sky is pale with stars, tiny frozen moments suspended overhead. You trace them through the slit in your tent flap, your eyes half-lidded, your breath slowing. It's strange, isn't it? How something as simple as two lines carved in bone could hold back the sun, could shape how you move, how you see, how you understand your place in the world. But maybe that's the lesson. That clarity doesn't always come from more light, or more information, or wider eyes. Sometimes it comes from less. From narrowing your gaze. From choosing what to focus on, and letting the rest blur softly into the background. You're drifting now. The snow outside shifts like a whisper. The land doesn't sleep. It never really does. But it quiets, just enough to let you dream. So let yourself rest too. Let the cold world keep spinning while you lie here, safe in the soft hush of bone and breath and memory. You've traveled far tonight, across ice and time and invention. You've felt the sting of light and the comfort of shade. And you've learned that seeing clearly doesn't mean seeing everything. It just means knowing where to look. So close your eyes now. You've earned this silence. You're home.